During the offseason, the Panthers were able to lure Charles Johnson back into the fold, bringing back one of the all-time great defensive ends in Panthers history. Now, he's added to the mix of a group of young players. This position, a lot of folks said this was a position of concern, but there's a lot of good stuff going on when you talk about these veterans.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Dave Gettleman and Ron Rivera feel about the group was addressed pretty early in the draft when the Panthers took Vernon Butler in the first round, and in the press conference right after that, they pretty much said, we like where our defensive end group is. They made no moves in the offseason other than bringing Charles back at defensive end, and that's key, certainly. It's going to be an interesting year for him. Charles had averaged 10.5 sacks in his 5 years as a starter in Carolina. Then last year, injury problems, missed half the regular season with a hamstring injury, only had 1 sack in the regular season. But then you get to the playoffs, he's back healthy, he had 1 sack in each of the postseason games. It'll be interesting to see, of course, whether he can pick up where he left off.
He looks ready to go, and I tell you, Max, another guy ready to take that leap towards being a star defensive end is Kony Ealy, who turned in a Super Bowl performance for the ages.
Yeah, Brian, talk about picking up where he left off. I mean, Kony Ealy would certainly like to do that after a Super Bowl performance where he had 3 sacks. And that's going to be one of the big questions for this team is what Kony Ealy are we going to see in 2016? We're going to see the one who had the ebbs and flows throughout the season where he had a stretch with a sack in each game, or the one that goes quiet. We saw in the Super Bowl, certainly, when he puts it all together, what kind of impact he can have on a game. And that's something this entire franchise is excited about. The key for him is going to be building on that performance and using that as motivation to say, when I'm at my best, this is what I can be. And if we get that, Kony Ealy in Carolina this year, well, this defensive end position is going to be just fine.
Well, Mario Addison is a guy who certainly does his job as well. Let's talk about some other guys who will battle to contribute along that defensive line. You talk about guys like Rakim Cox and Arthur Miley. And these guys are names that the fans probably don't know, but they're part of the reason why the Panthers were able to go in through free agency, not sign any defensive ends, or draft a defensive end.
Yeah, those are guys that Gettleman and Rivera referred to. Also mentioned Ryan Dallaire in that group as well, who did get a chance last year as a rookie coming over from Washington's practice squad and being on the active roster, making a real splash early. Then waiting in the wings were Rakim Cox, as you mentioned, who spent the entire year on the practice squad, and Arthur Miley, who was on injured reserve. And both those guys really made a splash in training camp. If you remember back, Mike, Cox was even running with the first team some in the preseason, ended up on the practice squad. Very exciting to see what he might be able to do if this is a breakthrough year for him.
Another deep and talented group, and that makes up that front four. Next time on Panthers.com, we'll talk about the best linebacker core in the NFL.